Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the webinar. My name is Nicole Jarrett, Senior Policy Analyst at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. Before turning the webinar over to our featured speakers, I'd like to briefly talk through a couple of house cleaning items about how the webinar is going to work, and then take a few brief moments to tell you a little bit about the National Reentry Resource Center and trends in funding for Second Chance Act mentoring programs. Anytime during this webinar, you can ask a question by typing it into the Q&A panel on the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. We will keep a running list of the content-related questions that we receive and then ask the panelists to respond to the questions during the last segment of the webinar. We will do our best to get through as many questions as possible. If you encounter technical or audio problems during this webinar, please call WebEx Technical Support at 1-866-229-3239. Please understand that there are some technical issues you may not be able to resolve. For this reason, we are recording this event and will email you a link to the recording next week. Our speakers for today's webinar are Janet Forbush and Joanne Helfrich. Ms. Forbush is an independent consultant specializing in program development and evaluation for human services programs. She has worked on national youth advocacy issues, including adolescent parents, youth involved in the juvenile justice and foster care systems, and children impacted by incarceration since the early 1970s. Currently, she is serving on the senior design team of the American Institutes for Research Mentoring Enhancement Demonstration Program, which is tasked with evaluating the 2012 Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Strategic Enhancement Grantees. Joanne Helfrich is the Executive Director of Aftercare for Indiana through Mentoring Incorporated. Aftercare for Indiana through Mentoring Incorporated. At AIM, Ms. Helfrich has led several federal, state, and private foundation grants and projects involving at-risk youth. Prior to joining AIM, Ms. Helfrich practiced law, family law, and served as a deputy prosecutor and deputy public defender in adult and juvenile courts. The National Reentry Resource Center is now in its fourth year, and it was established by the Second Chance Act to provide education, training, and technical assistance to states, tribes, territories, local governments, service providers, nonprofit organizations, and corrections institutions working on prisoner reentry. The Resource Center is administered by the Council of State Governments in partnership with the Bureau of Justice Assistance, U.S. Department of Justice. This is a snapshot of the Resource Center's homepage. We are constantly adding new content and resources to our website, and we send out a monthly newsletter that provides information about the latest research, funding opportunities, distance learning events, and other news about reentry. To sign up for the newsletter, please visit the link on your screen after today's webinar. In FY 2009, BJA awarded a total of $10 million to 36 SCA mentoring grantees. That same fiscal year, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention awarded 11 grants for mentoring programs targeting youth returning from juvenile justice facilities. In FY 2010, funding peaked at $14 million for adult mentoring programs and $4.5 million for juveniles. After that year, there was a significant drop in funding across both adult and juvenile programs. Also, beginning in 2011, mentoring grants were available from BJA in two categories: adult mentoring and mentoring focused on promoting responsible parenting. OJJDP did not release an SCA mentoring solicitation in FY 2012 or 2013. OJJDP typically offers several other funding opportunities for youth mentoring. For information about other funding opportunities available from OJJDP, please visit their website. This is a map showing the distribution of adult and juvenile SCA mentoring grantees from 2009 to 2012. Not shown are the two grantees in Hawaii and Alaska. I will now turn the presentation over to our first speaker, Janet Forbush. Good afternoon, Janet.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for that gracious introduction and helpful overview. It has been a delight to work with Nicole and Elizabeth and Joanne and Sean getting ready for today's webinar, and we're grateful that you've all signed up. Looking at the list of participants, it appears that we've got folks all the way from the West Coast, or nearly on the West Coast, all across the country, so this is great. And we have some people from projects that are serving youth and others that are serving the adults. So our effort today is really going to focus on putting some of the fun back in fundraising, and that is really an intentional message this afternoon. Fundraising can be daunting, but it can also be fun, and it can be a very creative, energizing activity. 4 areas that we want to address include the very real issue that sometimes confronts fundraisers, and that is that they've forgotten to do it right after they get the notice of grant award. Sustainability planning starts on the day that you get notification from a local foundation, a government agency, or a corporate giving body saying that you've won this particular award. Fundraising really must be going on all the time. Similarly, someone or a group of people in your agency need to be looking at your communities, your counties, your regions, states, and national contacts to maintain a viable and a lively approach to asset mapping, finding out where resources are, whether it's a new partnering agency, a new funding opportunity, a new member for your board of directors or your advisory board. This is really an intricate asset for you, and we'll spend a little time on that this afternoon. Also, as you have probably recognized in your communities, whether it might be Salt Lake City or Benton Harbor or Lexington, Kentucky, the value of collaboration cannot be overlooked. We are partners in an important effort to address what Nicole's slide showed a few moments ago, and that is that the funding support from the government, from the Department of Justice, has slipped down over recent years, and hence collaboration is now viewed by some foundations and government agencies as a way where they can continue to invest in communities, but they want to be sure that these collaborations are viable. We'll also look at some very key next steps for everyone to be taking in the coming months and in the coming years. We want to start out this afternoon by engaging you in asking whether or not you have really begun to implement fundraising for your project in your agency. So we'd like to have you take a moment and complete this first polling question. So we'll give you about a minute for this. So 4 options. We're a half minute into this process. So we're at 6, and I'm not seeing the responses.
All right. The responses should be appearing on your screen momentarily, I think.
Thank you, Sean.
Yep. In about 5 seconds. If you don't see them in 5 seconds, let me know, and I can let you know what the results were.
Okay, I don't see them.
You aren't seeing them. Okay. The responses, it looks like 25% selected B, not implemented but planned. 15% of respondents selected A, and 15% selected C, and also 15% D.
So a really unique mix here. And I think that it's not surprising that we have some of you who have not yet implemented but have planned. So this is encouraging. So the process, of course, is not a short one, but you're all involved in this to some degree, and so this is encouraging. The formality of your sustainability plan needs to be examined on a regular basis, and by that I'm trying to suggest that you need to review who on your staff or on your board is taking the lead responsibility and whether or not they need additional support. So resource planning is key in maintaining program and support services for the participants in our Second Chance Act mentoring programs. And one of the things that's important to do on a regular basis, certainly annually, is to reassess the program goals and objectives. Many of you submitted the proposals for the funding that you're now spending a couple of years ago. And obviously you're in agencies that are fluid and they're changing by day and you're serving different participants. So reassessing the program goals and objectives is something to keep in mind. Assessing results and sharing findings is also really fundamentally important. The current issue of the Chronicle of Philanthropy has an interesting article about Charity Navigator, which assesses nonprofits and their ability to demonstrate results. When you think about writing your performance measurement reports and submitting your ongoing annual reports to your board and to the funding agency, what can you show them in terms of how you have impacted the youth and the men and women who are adults in your programs? And are they really getting mentoring? If you haven't been able to recruit an adequate number of mentors, you might be finding different kinds of activities, but they're not getting the dosage of mentoring. And what about all of these allied support services that you must have to have a viable platform for reentry for young men and women coming back into their communities, and also young people who are in sometimes very marginal living circumstances, in foster care, group homes. So looking at these benchmarks, the number of participants in the program, how they were served, when they were served, these are all a part of your ongoing resource planning. Reviewing the program needs. Perhaps things have changed dramatically in Detroit or in Salt Lake City or wherever you're serving the clients that you're working with. And it's possible that you need to change some of the ways in which you're operating. You need an action plan. You need to set your priorities and clearly have a meaningful budget. Look at your current staffing. Who are the key staff people? Are they new? Are you involved with consultants in any meaningful way? Who are the volunteers and your advisory board members? How can you better support them? And do you need to incentivize them? The mentor recruitment issues that confront both the adult and the juvenile reentry programs are sometimes facing an issue where men and women who would have stepped to the plate to volunteer are now in a difficult economic circumstance themselves. How is your operational support functioning? Do you have a good data management system? Is it user-friendly for your staff? What about marketing and promotion? I was excited to review one of the websites for one of the reentry programs in Duluth a few weeks ago, and they were able to garner funding from a local community foundation to support their website. Very creative, very clever. I think it was the Dove site. How is your insurance? Is it as widespread as it needs? Risk management in mentoring programs is very, very important. And transportation. Are you taking advantage of participant trainings that are often available through state mentoring partnerships? Minnesota, Michigan, Massachusetts, Oregon, and selected other states have some terrific state mentoring partnerships that are hosting collaborative mentor training trainings, and they do these through Mentor National Mentoring Partnerships. So take advantage of what's out there that you might not have to pay for out of your own budgets. I don't know how many of you have on occasion said, gee, that was a really good report that I wrote for OJJDP. And then you might have thought, gee, I should have sent that to someone else, maybe in my community, who should have seen what we've accomplished. And in those reports, speaking to both process and outcome findings is essential. The process is how things are really working. Who is getting the services? When? Perhaps in your logic model, you had planned to offer mentoring to all of the adults at least once a week in person and then once a week via email or via phone or via another mechanism. Perhaps you're only able to meet with the mentee once every 2 weeks. What does that tell you? Does it mean that they're not getting the amount of mentoring, the dosage, if you will, that you had planned and anticipated for? Outcomes highlight how the clients, the young men and women and your adults, are actually responding to this intervention. Are you assessing it? Do you have some validated instruments that you are using to measure that match relationship quality over time? That's another part of what you put into the reports to your funders and to your potential funders and stakeholders, community partners. Don't play games with the results. In other words, all reports have some good news, but you need to be transparent. If your original match numbers were, say, between 20 and 30 or 20 to 50, and you wound up with only 10 matches because you weren't able to recruit mentors, look at that from the perspective of how those matches that you did make are evolving, developing. There is really a lot of conversation and dialogue about sometimes our push to get quantities of matches rather than qualitative matches. You are all working with people who have a range of needs. So it's oftentimes better to have a fewer number of good matches than achieving that ultimate goal that you had with the higher match numbers, and you find that the relationships are not developing and the mentees and the mentors are not working well together. Your external evaluator, if you have one, should become a part of your team, really a hub player on the team. If you don't have an external evaluator, but you have someone on your staff, that person needs to take on a key role in looking at your program and your operation through very fresh eyes on a regular basis. An executive summary for your reporting is always key. I looked through a report that was on the website for one of the reentry sites in Greater Oxnard, and I was delighted to find they posted their annual report on the website, Targeted Reentry Aftercare Mentoring, and it was prepared by an external evaluator who is professor and chair of the Department of Economics, Finance, and Accounting at California Lutheran University, and it's got the results, and they also have in this very thorough and careful evaluation report, they've got an executive summary. So it's, I'm sure that we can put the website for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Oxnard on what Nicole and Elizabeth will be distributing to you after our webinar. Reports should be required reading for staff and stakeholders. Don't leave them on your hard drive and not make sure that people read the results. And put the good news, which I said is always good news, up on your website with perhaps an anecdote about one of the matches that has blossomed as a result of your programming. Asset mapping, this is just a way to look at the United States, basically. We have lots of great aftercare and reentry programs that are now funded and operating. You are your own best support group. The folks on this website or on this webinar today, you are good friends by virtue of what you're doing. So keeping your eyes open for someone's expertise and skill set that can help you do better is the message. Examine your current partners. I'm sure that you all have explored your communities thoroughly and who is coming to the table with you and what they're contributing. Individuals certainly are front and foremost, but other organizations, similarly organizations that are in the same line of work. And do your asset mapping about your community foundations if you haven't tapped into that particular sector. You need a combination. For those of you who are affiliates of a national organization such as Goodwill Industries or the YMCA, Boys and Girls Clubs, you've got some natural support that flows down from the national level. And take advantage of that, because all of those organizations have benefited from federal funding from OJJDP in the last several years. Partners need to support your mission, however. So the clarity and the clear statement of mission that you have needs to be easy to understand and easy for someone to see how they can be a part of your efforts in your community. Who's missing? Sometimes you think you've got a great partnership with an agency or a corporation that's going to deliver to your program 20 mentors over the course of a year. And suddenly you revisit that and they're not there. And strategic to working with reentry populations is that viable tie-in with your Department of Corrections and your juvenile services. uh, stunningly, this has been a big hurdle for a number of agencies, even those apart from folks that have gotten money through the Second Chance Act. But the juvenile services connections need to be key, as do the connections with your Department of Corrections. And Joanne will speak more to what they've done so successfully in Indiana. I want to share with you a website that I think has a lot of powerful information because it is the work out of Opportunity Nation, which many of you might have had some connection with over the last couple of years. But they have an opportunity index that allows you to look at your community and your state, and it gives you a ranking on education, the overall community platform, services, jobs, and local economy. And it's a good part of your toolkit in really characterizing how important your program is in your community and helping to address what we all know are fundamental community safety concerns of people when they learn about the reentry program serving juveniles and adults. But this is a valuable resource as you're putting your opportunities together, your new funding opportunities. So I've talked fairly rapidly. I know not as rapidly as Nicole and Elizabeth want me to talk with you, but I want you to begin to think about finding one new funding opportunity just based on what you've heard already this afternoon. Sit back and think of who you haven't reached out to and who you might want to reach out to, and then we're going to invite you to answer this question, our second polling question, about where you are currently getting the majority of your funding, and you can only check one. Again, we're allowing a minute for you to put in your responses, and we're at 30 seconds. And I think, Sean, it would be helpful if you jumped in and offered the findings here again.
Yes, I will. I'm going to give it just a few more seconds to wrap up.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. It looks like 50% selected the federal, state, local government. And the rest of the respondents were kind of spread across the others. I guess the second most was the private public foundation. But the overwhelming majority comes from federal, state, and local government.
Okay, thanks. Probably not entirely surprising. We're now going to ask you very quickly to respond to this poll question, which examines the extent to which the Second Chance Act is supporting your programming.
All right, Janet, for the results on this one. Oh, I jumped in too soon. Gotta wait 5 seconds.
You were just so eager with the findings. Okay.
I was so eager with the findings, yeah. So the 75 to 100%, 25% of the people selected that option. And then 15% selected the 50 to 74%. 20% were the 10 to 25%. Yeah, so the winner was 75 to 100%, and that was a fourth of the people on the webinar.
All right, thank you. That is probably a very, very strong message for all of us this afternoon, that we need to be focusing on diversifying our funding. And it's not surprising that the amount of support from the Second Chance Act is central to many of you. It is, however, something that would probably be a basis for an upcoming conversation with your board of directors and with your development contact, either in your agency or those that are working with you, because that's especially of concern as we look at what's occurring today in terms of the diminishing government support. It's just a reality, and probably it suggests that we all need to be more carefully attuned to this. So where do we shop for money? The Foundation Center is a resource of extraordinary dimension and proportion, and their website allows you to look at links that focus on foundations in your own state that are listed in ways that are focusing on different sectors of support. So I would spend some quality time scoping out the Foundation Center, certainly touching base with United Way in your community if you're not already a party to United Way funding. That's a terrific avenue. They have a mentoring initiative that has been in play for about 2 years. And as I mentioned earlier, the site in Duluth Superior was able to garner funding from the United Way in that Midwest community to underwrite their website. Local and regional corporate giving bodies I would tap into. If I were in a place like, and I'm just identifying some communities like Jacksonville, Florida, or you've got some interesting businesses and industries. You've also got mentoring-friendly foundations. DuPont has supported a hospital-based mentoring program in Jacksonville. And I would think that if you don't have any connections with a local community foundation, then that would be a priority. In Minneapolis, the Carlson Foundation, and it's a family foundation, funds mentoring. In Green Bay and in Milwaukee, actually, the former quarterback for the Packers, Brett Favre, has a foundation. He puts money into the state of Mississippi and into Wisconsin. I would look at iconic figures in your community as well, who may be givers, if you will. And looking at this from a very creative way. Diversity is the mantra here, and that is what you're going to need to do. The government funding can be enlarged beyond the Department of Justice. The Departments of Labor, Education, education with a focus on the workforce training, some of the housing, public housing units in major cities are now supporting mentoring and initiatives around family support. And don't forget the resources of the Department of Agriculture, particularly the cooperative extension services that are very much interested in family development, family stability, and positive youth development. Of course, your philanthropic community, who has recently gotten their name put on a new sports facility or a new business or theater, cultivate some contacts. And if you don't feel you're the one to do the asking, that's something that perhaps a friend of yours or a member of your church or Rotary Club would be happy to step to the fore to assist you with. And certainly local collaborations are of increasing importance to funders. Similarly, your alums, who have you served over the last several years? How are they doing? And that's a testament to the success of your good programming and good efforts. Community collaborations are intentional, and it's a way where you lose some of the identity that you had as an individual organization, but you can work together to better serve your community, and it speaks to the current economic times. The sequestration process has had some impact on many of our communities, and cuts to services in the human services and youth development arena have begun. So working together is valuable. At the bottom of this slide, you see a particular source that I strongly recommend you tap into. It's a collaboration handbook, and it outlines in wonderfully clear ways how you move from just becoming a member, say, of a group that gets together in your community around reentry or youth matters into meaningful collaboration. What are the steps, the elements in that process? And it's one of two resources that I think we've identified for you here. But you're moving away from competing with someone who might be right down the road in Indianapolis to forming a consensus around a need that isn't going to go away. We're going to have numbers of men and women coming back to the communities and youth as well. And we cannot afford to back away from this as a mission of purpose. Collaboration is transformative, and it puts a little different lens on the picture. But it can, I believe, also help turn your agencies into much greater and more important contributors to the community fabric. You have greater results. My background includes a bit of community organization, and this was one of the very powerful lead community organizers in our country, and I think this quote speaks volumes today. So, results. Collaboration gives you greater vision, broader vision, and you're going to shift to long-term results. We don't want your programs those that are depending up to 50% on this grant to be off the radar screen in another year or 2 years. You might have the prospect of having a no-cost extension. Don't count on it, is just the reality of the climate. So we want to be around, and we want to be around to support your efforts and work with you. There is a particular set of collaborations that have worked remarkably well in this country, and one of them that I just highlight for you because I believe it spills over into Covington, Kentucky, where one of the grantee sites is located. The Strive Partnership has created a community dashboard of information and data management exchange, which is quite legendary. And look at the funders. United Way, the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, and Knowledge Works. And they also have garnered support from Procter & Gamble in recent years as well. So it's a good learning lesson around powerful collaboration. If you choose not to go down the route now or in the near future, you probably will want to look at strengthening your board to help you address the funding needs that will not go away. And if you don't have an advisory board, that would be a recommended value add. Similarly, if you're struggling a little bit with the staffing and whoever the internal person is that might be responsible for doing development and grant writing, it might seem costly to hire someone to help you write a grant. It might be very useful as long as you work closely with that grant writer. Don't let them be writing something that, should it get funded, you look at the language and you're clueless about what, in fact, is going to happen as you roll your program out. And I speak from many years of evaluation experience. I know that can happen. But it sometimes is a good investment. If you're going to disseminate your program results across the community and think about other people who may or may not have been in your audience, this is your message. And make sure your website is a channel of lively and current information. If you haven't already joined the Chamber of Commerce or your state association of nonprofits, that would be something that you might want to consider. And thank your current funders and contributors. Don't let them be wondering what's going on. Thank yous are so easy to lend and to offer, and they ought to be frequent and regular. Celebrate all of what you're doing, because the programs that are represented on this webinar today are extraordinary. And modify and adapt to respond to where we're at as of September the 12th, 2013. Consider all of the people on this webinar some of your new best friends and advocates as we work together. And one of the resources listed on this last slide is, I believe, one that we had sent out in advance of this webinar, Making the Most of Youth Mentoring, a guide for funders. It was intentional that we give this out to you because it helps you pretend that you're sitting in the chair at the local foundation in Indianapolis or Benton Harbor or wherever you're located. You put on the hat of the funder and think through that. There is a capacity roster, things that you ought to be able to demonstrate that's very useful. So now I believe I will turn this over to my colleague, Joanne.
Well, it seems like we're having some difficulty reaching Joanne. We might have lost her. So why don't we take this opportunity?
Nicole, this is Sean. I'm sorry. It looks like Joanne is back with us. Joanne, are you there?
Okay.
Yes, I'm back. I'm sorry. I did get disconnected for a moment. Is it my turn to go forward?
Yep, you're up.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I'm with Aftercare for Indiana through Mentoring. We work with about 100 to 150 youth a year in Indiana here, and I want the information that Jen has provided. It's very valuable information. And I'm just going to share a few things that we have found in what we are doing here, is that we have found that incorporating sustainability into an ongoing plan and constantly looking for opportunities that we can fund our program has been beneficial to us. One of the things that we have found that has really helped us is to work hard at establishing and maintaining a good relationship with DOC, your courts, and probation. They, let them know that you're coming in a spirit of cooperation and that your programming will complement the work being done by them. We try to keep our probation and Department of Corrections regularly communicate with them and update them and share information with them. And I think one thing that it's done for us is that it's allowed us opportunities to apply for grants that we alone were not eligible to apply for. For instance, when there other grant opportunities come up and it's with a government entity, our DOC has either contacted us or we've contacted them, and they have actually applied as needed, and we have been given the opportunity to provide the reentry and the mentoring piece to it. The other thing that we have found is letters of support are really important. And by maintaining those relationships and letting them know the good work that you're doing in the facility, it can be helpful. Another thing that we have found is establishing partnerships and collaborations with other nonprofits and faith-based. There may be opportunities where, maybe your organization doesn't want to take the lead or is not in the capacity to take the lead on a particular project, and you may be able to offer the mentoring piece. For instance, we have oftentimes partnered with people on Department of Labor grants. They may contact us and say, hey, we know that AIM provides the mentoring piece, and part of this grant requires us to have, mentors and to work with them. And while we're not in the position at this time to really want to take on that particular grant on our own, by being a partner in there, we can still fund and continue to do our mentoring. I think another important thing that Janet talked about was with foundations. Establishing those partnerships with your community foundations. We have found wonderful support here in Indiana with our local foundations. I think early on it used to be that there was kind of that debate on, who is supposed to fund this type of work. Is it DOC? Is it Children's Services? But I think the foundations have become more aware that, it affects everybody. It affects the community. And if you have opportunities to go to like panels or conferences where they're attending and speaking, I encourage you to do that. I met one of our wonderful supporters that we have through a local foundation when I attended a conference. They were talking, about what their organization looks for when they're doing funding, and the moderator had the good sense to ask the question, can you tell us what your pet peeves are? And one of the program officers said that his pet peeve was that people call him at the last minute and say, help, I need money, and they'll call him and say, can I schedule an appointment? And he says, when do you need it? And they said, well, we're out of money now. We need it now. So I knew that when I contacted him, the first question that he asked me was, well, when do you need to schedule the appointment? And I said, I'm available whenever you're available. That got me a ticket into the door. Not only did I schedule a meeting, but then he told me and said, hey, look, we have a submission in 2 weeks. If you want to prepare a draft, I'm willing to look it over and give you some ideas. During the meeting, we also threw around a couple ideas. I had 3 different ideas for programs to ask for support. Sometimes we find like they don't want to necessarily support the mentoring piece by itself, that you can combine it with something. For instance, we talked about things. We finally came up with a decision about doing job readiness training. Our mentoring to to be involved in that. Our mentors to be involved in helping the youth prepare for jobs. And so they ended up funding that. And I think once you've established that relationship with your local funders, they tend to want to hold on to you. We were fortunate enough to get funded for 3 years. The first time we turned around and got a second grant for them for 2 years. And we have another local foundation that has provided support for us for multiple years. And so I think that's really important. Another thing that is important is to keep remembering that this is an ongoing process and involve your board members. We have a wonderfully supportive team of board members. They can do some fundraising. I mean, debate out there whether or not the board members should, how active they should be involved in fundraising. But ours, we'll take on their annual events and help with other things. And they can often open up doors to other opportunities for you as well and things like that. So I think that those are some of the things that we have found that have been helpful for us. We recently were able to establish a partnership with a state college, community college, where we wanted to provide our reentry youth with culinary arts training, not just to turn them into chefs, but we wanted to provide job readiness opportunities for them in our community. And the partnership we ended up entering into after talking with them for a while ended up where we got access to this culinary arts kitchen, teaching kitchen 2 days a week. We were able to get an adjunct faculty member to teach that portion of it, and then AIM taught the job readiness portion of it. And I think that also has helped us with subsequent funding opportunities as well, because when the community funders and other people understand that you are going after these other opportunities and that you're entering into these collaborations, I think they're more likely to fund you. So in a nutshell, those are just some of the things that we have done and found to be successful. Hello.
Thank you, Janet and Joanne. We have time for a couple of questions, and the first question is directed to both Janet and Joanne, and it's broken down into 2 parts. And that question is, how do you go about engaging your agency's board or advisory group for fundraising purposes? And the second part to that is, what kinds of people should you be looking for to comprise a board or advisory group?
Joanne, do you want to go? Or? Well, I'll answer the first part of that. How do you go about really approaching the board member? Organizing your board so that there are different committees is one of the strategies that's key here. Not all board members are going to be good at making the ask. Some people are inherently very good, skilled askers, if you will. And I would make sure that you've got a committee with a constellation of men and women, diverse, culturally reflective of your community, and who are not only passionate about the mission of what you're doing, but they've got a 3-minute elevator speech that they can use wherever they go. And without question, key leaders from the financial services industry, from local businesses, people who are, in many cases, often retired but have time to do fundraising. I would be as well looking at whether you've got an alumni who has reached a point in their lives where they are quite successful and would be as well very effective spokesmen or women for your program. So that would be in terms of just helping them. And what was the second part, Nicole?
The second part, thank you, is what kinds of people should you be looking for to comprise a board or advisory group?
I think I mentioned a few. So, Joanne, what's your thinking there?
I think we try to look for people who have a passion for, the youth that we serve and the work that we do. You kind of want those that they always say that are thinkers and those that are passionate. But I think that they have a strong interest in your mission and what you're doing, and also ones that are willing to become involved and actively, taking a part in what you do. So we kind of look for a mix, and then I think there's always that part where they say, you want to find an accountant, you want to find, somebody who has different areas, maybe somebody in marketing and public relations that can help you with that, because oftentimes they may be willing to donate some of their services and do something in that area. But I think the most important thing is to find somebody who really believes in the mission that you're doing and wants to support that.
Great. Thank you, Janet and Joanne. Joanne, this question is directed to you. What information about your program services or accomplishments do you think your partners find most compelling?
I think that not only the statistics are really important in providing the outcomes, but one of the funders that we've befriended over the years told us, you want to paint a picture of your youth, that for the number of the youth that we're working with, they may have so many more barriers than a lot of other youth that grow up in, a more affluent family. And so I always make a point whenever I do any reports to try to include a picture of the youth, where they've been, where they are, and where how far they've come, so that they can paint that picture. So I think that really making the youth come alive to your funders is really important.
Great. Thank you, Joanne. And the last question, which is directed to both Janet and Joanne, is what types of social media and marketing platforms have you found most effective in advancing sustainability efforts for mentoring programs?
This is truly an emerging area that has gained a lot of popularity and application over the last 3 to 5 years. I think that some of the programs that are using the Facebook and the Twitter and Pinterest, all of those vehicles, are finding that they're attracting interest from different demographic groups than previously. But it's an easy way to add this to the portfolio of fundraising, and very, very valuable. I think if you haven't explored it, it needs to become a part of your program operation.
Yeah, I think that we're seeing more and more interest by funders about social media. We're not as far ahead as I'd like to be at AIM. We, have a website, but I think nowadays when we're filling out a lot of the applications, it will say, what's your Twitter address, what's your Facebook address, and we are trying to get more on board and do more of that.
I would go back and offer as well the observation that even revisiting your website is important. If you haven't updated the website recently and there are old items up there, bear in mind a fundraiser who is dependent upon that is going to have a bit of a challenge, and funders are looking at websites. I think that I mentioned that program report from the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Oxnard. They've got a side link on evaluations for their agency, which would be very appealing to a prospective funder.
Great. Thank you, Janet and Joanne. Thank you very much. This concludes today's webinar. After you exit the webinar, a brief survey will appear on the screen. By answering the questions in the survey, you will be helping the Resource Center improve on the services we offer. We'd greatly appreciate it if you would take just a few minutes to complete the survey. We will also email a link to the recording of this presentation, as well as a link to a PDF of the PowerPoint slides used in the presentation next week. Thank you again for your participation.
Thank you.